On May 17th of 2019, Spotify announced the Spotify Car Thing, a tiny little round wheel thingy with a screen. It connected to your car stereo and phone to display the song you were listening to. You could scroll through playlists, podcasts, and it generally just made controlling your music a bit easier. It was available to select Spotify Premium subscribers, and was intended to gather data about how people listen to their music and what their preferences and listening habits were. They said they weren't planning to make it into a commercial product, but that was a fucking lie. This model is often referred to as the first generation or beta car thing, but some also refer to it by its model number CT001, which is what I refer to it as. It came in this big white box with an orange slipcover. The back of the box boasted about how no phone is required to use the car thing, which is ironic because the commercial model doesn't work whatsoever unless a phone is connected to it. From what the box tells us, it looks like the CT001 was capable of storing music and podcasts in its cache for when the connection drops, which is pretty impressive for a unit this small. Removing the sleeve, we get this orange Spotify logo. The box is made of a very thick cardboard, and it's one of those boxes where you gotta wiggle the top off the bottom. Here it is. The first thing that catches your eye is this neon green power adapter. Yes, that's the power adapter, but first let's check out the main unit. The shaft has these 4 braille looking buttons here that are touch sensitive. These act as preset buttons to quickly access a playlist or mix. They're in a really weird spot and they're all pretty close to each other. This wheel surrounds the screen and infinitely goes left or right. It's wrapped in a very thick rubber that looks like it fell off a monster truck toy. The screen in the middle acts as a button too. On the back we have 2 buttons, the power button and the mute button. The mute button just mutes the mic so we can't use any voice commands, and this way the shadow government can't steal our Spotify information. The power button is just that. It turns the system on and off. These here are the pins for the power adapter. So let's check that thing out. The USB cable is hardwired to the pack, so you can't switch out the cable if you rip it or anything. It snaps onto the back of the car thing magnetically and culminates to this fat, bulky chode of a music player. Here on the bottom of the unit, there's an aux port for a wired connection to your car stereo. Now, worth noting is that when you snap the power brick on, you lose access to these buttons on the back. What a stupid fucking design flaw. So if you want to mute or unmute, you have to rip the thing off first. And what the fuck's the point of the power button being under the power brick? Why would you need to shut the thing down if you just rip the power off? Well, I'll get to that in a second. All the manuals and instructions it comes with are very bright and colorful. They do a really great job of designing these booklets and making them simple and easy to understand. Up top we have all our mounting parts. You can set it up on your dashboard, vents, or CD slot. This knob on the back loosens and tightens and pops onto the mounts. Let's turn this thing on. It takes about 30 seconds or so to boot up, which is really not good. To wait that long every single time you turn your car on seems a bit stupid. The first thing I thought when the screen turned on was, oh shit, there's a row of dead pixels at the bottom of the screen. But no, that's just how it's designed. After 25 seconds, the logo turns green and so do the preset buttons, and then it lets you add a Bluetooth connection. As you can see here, I've been trying to connect this thing to my phone, but it wasn't working. You can sit there forever, trying different phones, trying different connections, even using the aux cable, you won't get it to work. Remember when I said you have to rip the back off to hit the power button? Well, here's what happens. It still runs perfectly fine, but after a few seconds, you get a warning to plug it back in or the unit will shut down. So it lets you take it off to mute, but you can only take it off for about 10 seconds. That's some dumb shit. So the actual car thing has a battery in it that only exists so you can press the button behind the battery? That's some dumb shit. I will say, however, it's possible the battery inside the car thing exists for caching purposes, but I really have no idea. Since you can't use the CT001 with a phone, let's see if I can get it working with a car stereo. The error you'll always get is that there's no connection. I don't know why it's saying this. No shit, there's no connection. You're not connected to anything besides a power brick. Why would you have any connection yet? I planned on using the vent mount, but the mount didn't fit any of these vents, so I'm just gonna hold it. If it did fit though, that would be a shame because this thing sticks out so fucking far it's ridiculous. What an ugly machine to stick on your dashboard. It looks like it has the quality of something you would find on Etsy. Not to say that everything on Etsy is bad quality, but a multi-billion-dollar company should not be making things comparable to Etsy products. It just looks and feels like something somebody 3D printed. After a healthy amount of fucking around, I finally saw the car stereo. It finally connected after a while of sucking. While I attempt to get it to work, I'd like to mention the buttons. This screen here technically has 5 buttons, one in the center and one on the top, bottom, left, and right. The center is a pretty unspecific spot, and sometimes you'll try to press down to go back, but end up trying to connect to something. It's so fucking annoying. After a long process, I could not get it to work, not even with the aux cord, which comes with a little cool pouch. The reason for this is because Spotify's servers don't recognize this as a compatible device anymore and stopped supporting it a while ago. Because of this, it's incapable of pulling a pairing code from the internet, so you can't pair your Spotify account with it. Not anymore, at least. There is a secret command where if you press the up button 10 times in a row, you'll get a secret Wi-Fi menu. Here you can pick a connection and you get this long wheel-based keyboard to enter the password if there is one. Once you do that and manually connect it to the internet, you can finally get a pairing code, but unfortunately, it still doesn't work. The website is capable of recognizing the code and even accepting it, but the car thing can't actually receive the confirmation back, so it's just worthless. Spotify said it was just for data collecting from premium users, kinda like some weird Nielsen report. There's no proof this was meant to become an actual thing you could buy, but a year later on April 13th, 2021, Spotify finally changed their minds and announced the newly designed Spotify car thing. The new design featured a 3x5-inch touchscreen with a 480p display. The wheel had been replaced by a smaller dial that could also be pressed as a button. The preset buttons were moved to the top and a back button was added. The switch from a chunky dick with one ball design to a thin, simple display was a huge improvement. Instead of connecting to your car stereo to display music, the device would instead connect to your phone. This really changed the demographic the car thing was going for. Instead of being a tiny screen for car stereos that already have Bluetooth, the new car thing was catering to people with older cars that didn't have Bluetooth or stereos with a screen. This acted as a stereo that displayed your music and podcasts, and later on it would even be able to display playback options for media like YouTube and phone calls. The new car thing was released in limited quantities to select premium subscribers. These early adopters who signed up for the waitlist even got theirs for free. It wasn't until later that year on October 14th, Spotify finally released it bit by bit to premium users. The car thing launched at a pretty steep $79.99 and required you to be a premium subscriber to even purchase it. This one is commonly referred to as just the car thing. The model number for this final release is YX5H6679. I have no clue why. At least with CT001 it meant something. Car thing 001. Maybe this does mean something, but I don't really think so. Out with the orange, in with the pink. This new box design kept the slipcover, but is much smaller than the CT001 models. It's got all these pictures and information all over it. The cardboard it comes in is much lower quality and lighter, not the heavy-duty stuff the old one came in. The Spotify logo on the box is pink now this time. And here's the car thing. It's got a nice big screen and a dial. As you can see, on top is the row of buttons. 4 of these are preset buttons for mapping playlists, and the one on the very left is the settings button. The dial on the front acts as a button alongside the back button below it. They also put a little rubber Spotify tag on the side. Other than that, in the box, we have all the manuals and papers you would expect. They're fucking impossible to take out of this cardboard paper band thing. The instructions are nice and bright with cool pictures. The setup guide is a bit bland, but I'll let that slide this time. If you thought taking this thing out of the band was bad, try putting it back in. It's insane. This thing must take bare minimum 3 minutes to put back. Such a fucking chore. I guess they just expect you to rip it, but not me. Once you finally get it, it's like such an accomplishment. Under these papers, we've got all our mounting supplies. Most of them use the exact same design as the CT001 model. And of course, the power brick. It's such a beautiful car plug, so shiny and slick. But enough of this box shit, let's see the fucking thing. So, to turn this thing on, you gotta use a high voltage brick or cigarette lighter. If you skimp out, you'll get this message. The CT001 model needed a high voltage power supply too, but if it wasn't plugged into one, it just wouldn't turn on. At least this one gives you a warning, but if you hold down the back button and the settings button at the same time, you can just bypass it, and it works perfectly fine, so I don't get the point. It uses a USB-C cable instead of the proprietary brick that the other one used. If you want to use this inside, you're going to need a fast charging or super fast charging USB brick. Most new phones come with one. Anyway, once it's on, you get a really nice user interface. First thing I'm going to look at is the settings. The first option in settings is the mute option. This model did it right. Much better than having a button, let alone one underneath the battery. You can also see any phones you've connected and add a new one. The front of the devices has a barely visible light sensor that can sense how bright it is in your car. With night mode on, the screen will automatically change brightness based on what it sees, which is nice because you don't want to have a bright screen distracting you at night while you're driving. Worth mentioning by this point is that I've been using the dial to scroll, but you can also use the touchscreen. It's not the best, which is to be expected, but it has some nice touches like rubber banding. The on-screen tips is in reference to the suggestions Spotify will give you while you drive sometimes. They're pretty fucking annoying, and I like to keep them off. They'll pop up out of nowhere and tell you some dumb shit you already know. And they block the song info. If you have a car thing mounted to your vent, the airflow might fuck with the voice commands. So you can turn this warning that if it is fucking with the voice commands off, if you don't care. Tips just let you look at all the tips that can pop up in no specific order. It's kind of like the hints option in the the Super Smash Bros. Games. There's also the About section. It just lets us see all the funky numbers that are oh so cool. The country is set to Sweden because that's where Spotify HQ is. You can't actually change it. Yeah, as you can tell, this is a real blast. And lastly, we have the power settings, which just lets us power off, restart, or factory reset. Well, on to the actual music. It all works through your phone. Setup is easy and even animated. Messing with the Bluetooth, though, can sometimes be a nightmare. Occasionally your phone just won't want to connect, and it can suck. These devices can be pretty buggy sometimes, not just with the connection, but with graphical glitches too. Once it's ready to go, you're in for some cool stuff. You can touch on the screen to pick a song, playlist, artist, or whatever, and control most stuff through the car thing. Like I said, it's all on your phone. The car thing is more of a display of what's on your phone than it is a standalone music player. It doesn't have speakers or anything like that, it just controls whatever audio is happening on your phone. Your phone then connects to your car in some way, so it gives the illusion of having your own little music TV in your whip. The UI is fantastic for a little tiny device like this. You can scroll through with the dial, jump around with the touchscreen, and even check out different tabs. Everything is separated into tabs and is only in one row, which makes sense. You don't want too much going on if the intended user is someone currently driving. A lot carries over from the mobile app. While listening to a song, you can tap on the artist and check out some of their other songs, and even add them to the queue. On the bottom here, there's buttons for shuffle, previous, next, pause, and like. The shuffle button can be turned on and off, and whenever you turn it back on, it reshuffles the queue like it normally would. Adjusting the volume with the dial while listening changes your phone volume, which in turn adjusts the car's volume. You can also use the touchscreen to tap and scroll through a song. I wouldn't recommend it though, since it's pretty laggy, especially using the dial to skip around. It's so inconsistent and barely works. I don't know why it's an option. It's all pretty easy for someone who's used the app a lot to understand. If you use Spotify anywhere, you could pick up on this right away. Another big selling point was podcasts. If you listen to podcasts, this thing has you covered, with unique UI for navigating episodes, and even the ability to skip ahead and back 15 seconds just like in the app. You could even change the speed of the audio. There's a lot of speed options for some reason. I don't know why there needs to be so many. The only real complaint from this interface is the touchscreen. Since it's so shit, it can get annoying sometimes when you're scrolling through your favorite songs and there's like a full second of latency. The time between your actions and either device updating are usually instant though. Sometimes when it's laggy, it can take a few seconds. Sometimes it bugs out and won't even change at all. As for the display, even though the screen is only 480p, it displays images really nicely since it's such a small screen. And you're not going to shove your face up to this thing, so you wouldn't really notice the low resolution. The car thing is compatible with 3G and 4G connections, and since it communicated directly through Spotify on your phone, Spotify can release firmware updates improving features and UI. Shortly after release, Spotify announced support for phone calls being displayed, and even media like YouTube videos. Using it in a car is really nice. The car thing connects to the mount via a magnet this time though, which kinda sucks. You'll be listening to something, then want to change the playlist and end up twisting the whole fucking screen. That's some dumb fucking design. Let's have a button you need to press to switch playlists, but let's not actually support the unit well enough to not fuck up the mount. For my car, I use the CD mount. It just sticks into your CD slot and you pop the thing on. The car thing is a blessing for older cars who want the luxury of Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It's some way to have a screen in an old piece of shit. My car doesn't have Bluetooth or an aux port, so I have to use a Bluetooth FM transmitter to get this to work. The cable snaking around is a bit ugly, but I think it's more than worth it to have this thing in my car. And like I said about the updated feature, I can understand phone calls, but why video media? It makes sense a little bit, but the context other than watching YouTube videos while driving is pretty rare, I can only imagine. I don't know, maybe it's for when you're parked. These car things would constantly go in and out of stock for the first couple of weeks, but eventually they were officially publicly released on February 22nd, 2022 at $90 and were pretty easy to get. A little too easy. Sales began to slow down massively, and it didn't take too long for Spotify to drop it to $79.99, then $49.99, then $29.99. Yeah, sales were not looking too hot. By August of 2022, as a last-ditch attempt to sell these things, Spotify dropped the price down to $30, $60 less than when it originally launched at back in October, and they started shipping them in this green slipcover instead of the pink one. Despite the new coat of paint, this was the exact same model as the pink box. Even the model number was identical. They changed up the pictures and text, but that's about it. The Spotify logo on the cardboard was still pink, not even green now, and the manuals and booklets all stayed the same. Despite this seeming pointless, there was an actual difference. The new green boxes came installed with the latest firmware, unlike the pink boxes that launched with the earlier one. That's literally it. No other changes, and that's not even a change. By July 27th of 2022, Spotify announced they would discontinue the car thing, citing inflation and supply chain issues. If you ask me, they didn't advertise this thing enough. I think there's a lot more people with older cars who would have loved this thing, and the only marketing they did for it showed it in a car, but a lot of people use this thing at their desk. It makes for a great little song screen, and with fan-made accessories, you can mount this thing to most mic and GoPro stands. And limiting it to premium users, while it kinda made sense, it also made it harder to learn about and find the car thing online. It seemed more of an obscure thing, and if you were wondering what happens if you try to set one up with a non-premium account, it just doesn't let you. As for any songs that are playing from local files, they send the song info to the car thing, but they can't send the album cover. Spotify even integrated their own voice assistant, Hey Spotify, which does come in handy sometimes. Today, Spotify still hosts setup videos and manuals on their site, but they don't sell them anymore. Getting any info on this thing is such a struggle. As far as I'm aware, there is no video that exists online of the CT001 model running, and there is no documented timeline of events and releases for the car things. I had to do a lot of snooping around with the Wayback Machine. Buying one today is a pain in the ass. eBay seems to have the term blacklisted or something, so you have to do a lot of digging around to find one. And if you do, expect to pay anywhere from $100 to $200. If you do want to get one, I recommend getting one off of Mercari. Despite Spotify discontinuing it, the user base of the car thing is alive and well. There's a die-hard hacking scene that's done some pretty impressive stuff. The Car Thing Hacks subreddit is full of crazy shit, and I highly recommend checking it out. All in all, the Spotify Car Thing is a pretty interesting piece of technology that's going to get less and less recognition as time goes on. I think the people who use it are going to be using it for a very long time, and the people who didn't care about it never will. I'm Bearman, and I've been wasting your time. Thank you for watching.